Welcome to Brothers of the Word, because, brother, you need the Word. And as you know, I have been preaching a series called The Plagues of Egypt. It is absolutely the longest series that I've ever done in over 25 years of ministry. And today is actually number 19 in The Plagues of Egypt. And today is the last one of the series. Now, the thing about it, the plagues are not over. Matter of fact, they're just ramping up. But I'm through with the series after today. So I am glad to be, I'm not going to say I'm glad to be finished with the series, because it let me know God knew what was coming. And there have been so many plagues of illness, of economics. We've had the plague of locusts. Pastor James sent me an email yesterday. It's a plague of sandstorm coming on the U.S. It's all these plagues are coming, but God knew they were coming, and God's hand is in the midst of all of them. So I'm just glad to just be reminded that God's got all this in control. And I was led to just go back and look to see exactly when did God tell me to preach on the plagues of Egypt. And I try to write everything down in my notes, and the note is dated. And when I look back, God spoke, the plagues of Egypt is the next series that you shall preach on Thanksgiving Day last year. And when I looked back and saw it, because I didn't remember when he had told me, I said, this was Thanksgiving Day. God never does anything accidentally or haphazardly. There's a message and there's a purpose in it if you have the discernment enough to see what it is. I preached part 1, Bumps Over Bruises, Bumps Over Blessings, on January the 19th. This is the end of June. The plagues of Egypt began with people focusing on their bumps over their blessing, and it ends today with the message entitled, The Plague of Thanksgiving Day. Now, I know some of you are saying, why is Thanksgiving Day a plague? Because for so many people, when God spoke this to speak about the plagues of Egypt on Thanksgiving Day, first of all, Thanksgiving Day is not a holy day, it's one of man's holidays. The number of official U.S. holidays equals the exact number of biblical holy days, but our holidays replace our holy days. And Thanksgiving Day is a man-created day. It's a good thing, but it's not particularly a God thing. As a matter of fact, when you look at most of God's holidays, God has the people abstaining from certain things. They can't eat leavened bread or something. With man's holidays, we gorge ourselves to death. It's the whole opposite of what God intended, what God had. Thanksgiving Day, we just be back to pop. We're coming up on a holiday, 4th of July. We're going to barbecue all day long. We're going to be back to pop with that. See, all of man's days, when you really look at it, they're different from the way God put his holy days. But what is the plague of Thanksgiving Day? The plague of Thanksgiving Day is simply that too often we focus on one day when it should be Thanksgiving every single day. And oftentimes we will take time to focus on giving thanks one day of the year. What day has God not been good to you? So when we get into the mentality, and see, this is the thing that messed up the children of Israel. And God says, you got 3 messages even after I finished the main 10 plagues, and the first of those 3 was called the plague of first words. It was the first words that they spoke when they were freed out of Egypt, and those first words were negative. And when we look in the book of Numbers, chapter 14, beginning at the 26th verse, the Lord said to Moses and Aaron, how long will this wicked community grumble against me? I have heard the complaints of these grumbling Israelites. Y'all know any grumbling folk? God said, look, he said, how long? I can't get it out of my head, this black comedian who used to say, how long would it blank blank go on? You know, that's so God, you know, God, I could count it. If God was a cursing man, I could imagine he would have put some stuff in there when he says, how long will this wicked community grumble against me? I have heard the complaints of these grumbling Israelites. So tell them, and this is what God told Moses and Aaron to tell. So tell them, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do to you the very things I heard you say. Now, this is actually, it was the third plague after the children of Israel were freed from Egypt. And that first plague of those 3 plagues was the plague of first words. And God here tells them in Numbers, surely I'm going to do to you exactly what you've been saying. I want you to turn to the person next to you and ask them, what have you been saying? God says He's going to do to you exactly what have you been saying. What have you been saying? And it makes such a big difference. I'm continuing on with Numbers 14:29. God said, in this desert your bodies will fall. Every one of you 20 years old or more who was counted in the census and who has grumbled against me, not one of you will enter the land I swore with uplifted hand to make your home, except Caleb, the son of Jephunneh, and Joshua, the son of Nun. There was no mark of the beast. There was no devil, no demons. The differentiating factor, God says, every one of you who has grumbled against me. That was the factor. See, we worry about all this big old deep stuff about where the mark going to be. I'm going to get a chip in my... No, God said, every one of you who has grumbled against me going to die in this wilderness. Every one of you who has grumbled against God. And as you can, you know, what I want you to do, dealing with the plague of Thanksgiving Day, I want to give you permission and even ask you to do this. As you can think of something that God has done for you, I want you to just holler out, thank you. Thank you. So you got my permission, just even during the message. Don't say amen. Just holler out, thank you. And maybe I won't even be able to get my words across because there'd be too many thank yous popping up. But that's all right. It changes how we view things, and this is the plague of Thanksgiving Day. Sometimes we only got one day, and for 364 days a year, we grumbling and complaining. And sometimes I'm not even sure about Thanksgiving. I'm not totally sure about how thankful we are even on Thanksgiving. AV, I want you to play the video. Now, I actually recorded this video before I came to church this morning. Go ahead and play the video.
This is Coach Bronner, and I'm getting ready to show you something in my office. This is the hallway to the office. There's no one here but me. It's early in the morning, but I want to show you this. I use my finger to open the door, turn on the lights. Now, this is the office. This is where I work. I've got a phenomenal office. Everyone who comes in says, wow. Now, this is my private restroom. When I walk in, the commode opens on
Thank you.
Saw this on a brother's trip in Japan and really love that commode and got one. It's got a whole lot of fancy features on it. But that's just it's a bathroom in the office. This is where I work most of the day. I stand there, and that's a dual monitor system. Very, very, very efficient. And getting ready to go now to the main office. It's over here, turning on the lights. When people come into my office, they say, wow, this office is just phenomenal. And it really is. I knew I was going to be spending a lot of time here for a lot of years, and this is where I spend that time. But what I want to show you is this. This is a mural that the designer put on the wall. And when I came in to see the mural, what I noticed, the edges of the mural were not quite lined up. As you can see right there, they're off a little bit. And it's kind of like that because these murals are panels. And as you can see, they're not quite aligned. And I told the designer, I said, look, these things they're not really aligned. And it's just not straight. And the designer said, look, I will take this down, I will replace it, put it back up, and make sure everything is straight. Now, the thing about it is this. While they were working on this office, a rainbow appeared on this mural. A rainbow. It never happened again. Somehow the light from the window, which is right there, curtains were open. Well, there were no curtains at the time when they were working on the office, but a rainbow appeared on it. It was a divine blessing that came on this wall. And when I told the designer about the misalignment of the panels, and they said they would be glad to put it down, go get another one, replace it, and get it straight, I heard a voice that simply says, this office has been blessed. Don't you dare replace this. And this is the statement I want you to understand, what I heard from heaven. There is no perfection in the material plane. Stuff will always have misalignment, stuff not right, stuff not going to be, in your opinion, the way it should be. There is no perfection in the material plane. And I could get all bent out of shape in this office. It's absolutely phenomenal because I'm worried about a few little things that are misaligned. And because I'm worried about those few little things that are misaligned, I miss all of the blessing and all of the beauty of what is. You're always going to have some things that are not going to be to your liking. It's not going to be perfect. There is no perfection in the material plane. Understand this. And when you understand this, your blessings begin to flow because you begin to flow with your blessings. This is Coach Bronner. I'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you. And see, now I've got one of the fanciest toilets on the face of the earth. I really do. That toilet, it has a remote control to it, like a TV remote. You can program it. It will shoot warm water on your behind, and it'll shoot air on your behind. I mean, it really does. You can control the temperature. The seat is heated. You can control the temperature of the seat. You can control the temperature of the water. When you walk, the light come on inside the commode, so you got a light there, the seat pop up. You can push the button, let the seat down. It is the most highly advanced toilet in the world. But you know what I need to be the most thankful for? I don't have any plumbing problems. See, you can have the fanciest toilet in the world, but if you constipated, it ain't worth a hoot. So many men got prostate problems, and they can't even urinate worth a hoot. So it doesn't matter how. You see, this is what I'm saying. You need to be thankful, because some of you are going to say, ooh, Pastor, I'm just upset because I ain't got a toilet like that. Look, your biggest blessing is that you can use the bathroom. Do you understand that? Thank you. Look, if you can use the bathroom, say, thank you. Do you know what a problem that is? When you can't use the bathroom, it's a problem. So we have so much to be thankful for. It's just amazing. You know, a little boy was asked to say the prayer at Thanksgiving dinner. And after thanking God for the food and for his family, he kind of ran out of things to say. And then he said, now let me tell you about some of the things I'm not thankful for. So sometimes we got a tendency, even on Thanksgiving Day, some folk just be grumbling about things. They take it just a little dry. Some folk be grumbling about things even on Thanksgiving Day. And there was one man who had just a habit of grumbling even at the family dinner. And he'd be complaining about stuff all of the time. And he had a little girl. And his daughter asked him, he said, Daddy, does God hear everything that we say? And the daddy said, well, sure does. He sure does. And she said, Daddy, when you pray, does God hear everything that you say? So Daddy started puffing up. Oh, yeah. Dad, God hears all Daddy's prayers. Yes, he does. Yes, he does. And then the little girl said, well, Daddy, when you complain, which one does God believe? And sometimes when we're up praying, we got all these glorious prayers, but when we're out in the world and we begin to complain, which one does God believe? See, because I believe the children of Israel had done some praying. But God didn't mention that. He said these grumbling Israelites. They're grumbling and they're not even looking at all of the blessings I have granted them. And people, we're like that. God has just given us so much. A man was at the post office, and this old man walked in. The old man walked in on a cane, and he got a new postcard off the rack, and his hands were shaking, and he was trying to write. And then the young man said, excuse me, sir, would you mind? I can help you with that. I can help you. I can address the postcard for you. So the young man got the postcard. The old man told him the address, and he wrote down the address on it. He said, what note would you like to write on the postcard? I'll be glad to help you with that. So the young man took time. He wrote out exactly what the old man told him. And he says, anything else you would like to add on the postcard? And the old man said, yeah, it's one other thing I want to put on there. P.S. Excuse this sloppy handwriting. See that? See, sometimes we're not thankful for what God has granted us. And we look for these negatives, and it happens so much, and it happens so often that we just get to the point where God just gets upset with us. Andrew Carnegie, who was kind of the Bill Gates and the Jeff Bezos of the olden days, when he died, he left one of his relatives $1 million. And the relative was just as mad as the relative could be, because he said, my relative Andrew Carnegie, one of the richest men in the world, he's left over $300 million to charity, and he only leaving me $1 million. And this relative went to his grave fussing about that $1 million. And the thing about it, Andrew Carnegie died in 1919, a little bit over 100 years ago. At that time, $1 million was worth the equivalent of a little over $30 million today. But he was just fussing about it. Now, some of you are saying, how in the world can somebody fuss about somebody giving you $30 million? The same way you fuss about your check. See, it's all relative. The same way you fuss about your check. When God has granted you something, same way you fuss about the liberty of your check, the check paying your rent, the check buying you food, the check paying for your car note, check doing all this kind of, this little bit of your check, and then it ain't happy, this little bit of your check. The same way Andrew Carnegie's relative was talking about this little bit of $1 million, man got all this money, he ain't giving me but $1 million. Shoot, I'll be ashamed of himself. And we're not thankful for all of the things that God has given us. Samuel Leibowitz, he was a criminal lawyer and judge. He saved over 78 men from the electric chair. But the thing about the 78 men he saved from the electric chair during his career, he says not one of them ever came back to thank him. You say, how can that be? Same way when Jesus healed the 10 lepers. And leprosy was worse than AIDS. See, how you say leprosy? Because you can see it on the outside. See, you can have AIDS and get nobody to tell it. But with leprosy, you could see it on the outside, and when you walk down the street, you had to go on the other side of the street. And not only did you have to go on the other side of the street, you had to holler out as you walked, unclean, unclean, unclean. So Jesus healed 10 lepers of one of the worst diseases ever. It's not, see, one of the things about this virus, you can't tell you got it. So you don't know whether you're a carrier or not with leprosy. It showed on the outside, and it was the worst disease. It was highly contagious, showing on the outside, and you had to holler out unclean. So this was one of the worst diseases ever in history, especially for social ostracization. It was one of the worst diseases ever. And 9 out of 10 who were healed by Jesus never even came back to say those 2 simple words. Thank you. Thank you. So many times we go through life and we are not thankful for the things and the stuff we are given. And the story is told about a devout king who was disturbed by just the ingratitude of his royal court. And he prepared a big banquet for them. And when the king and his royal guests were seated, a beggar shuffled into the hall with ragged clothes and smelling, and he sat down and just began eating all the stuff, gorged him with food, and just ate. Once he was full, he got up without a word and left the room. And all of the royal guests were just mad. And they asked the king, can we go and just have the guards seize this man? Let's just throw this man into prison. He came in here uninvited, stinking to high heaven, ate up all the food in front of him, got up and just left. Can we just have the guards go get this man and throw him in jail? And the king said, look, that beggar has done only once to an earthly king what each of you does 3 times a day to God. You sit there at the table and eat until you are satisfied, then you walk away without recognizing God or expressing one word of thanks to him. How many times do we partake of the blessings of God, but we're like the grumbling Israelites? How many times? And the question that God has to ask, that he asked Moses and Aaron, how long? How long will we be unthankful for so much that God has given? Thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you. I mean, when you just think about all of the stuff that God has granted you, it is such a blessing and it is so magnificent. You see, children often don't appreciate what parents do for them. Children have a very short memory. They don't remember, and they're not concerned about what you did for them yesterday or last week or last year, and they don't care about what you're going to do for them tomorrow. Often the only thing children are concerned about is right now. What are you going to do for me right now? That's why I believe God called them the children of Israel. They forgot all of the past. They forgot about the Red Sea. They forgot about when God brought them out. The minute they had just a little bit of turmoil, then they went to hollering and complaining and grumbling and grumbling and grumbling and grumbling. So when we learn to be thankful, it changes things. See, in relation to Thanksgiving, there are basically 3 kinds of folk. Number 1, those who take God's blessings completely for granted. They just ain't, they just at the table just eating. They just take God's blessings completely for granted. Not thankful for the food, not thankful for the teeth that can chew it, not thankful for the digestive system, not thankful even for the sewage system. Do you know how good of a sewage? See, have you all ever been to some of these other? See, Elijah, do you remember when we were in China and we were coming off the Great Wall and we stopped by the bathroom? What did I do? And I had to use the bathroom. What did I do? I left out. You know why I left out? Because the bathroom, it smelled so bad, I couldn't even breathe in that thing. I went out there, I said, oh my goodness, this thing stinks. And I had to turn around and come back. See, until you have experienced some of this stuff, you don't appreciate a bathroom that not smelling the high heaven. You don't appreciate some of that stuff. See, the reason I can appreciate my bathroom, See, some folk will get that, once they got that fancy commode in a week's time, they forget about the blessing. I'm thankful every time I go to the bathroom. It's sweet smelling, it's clean, all my system are working. Until you have experienced the other extreme, you're not thankful for what you got. And see, Elijah still didn't even remember that. See, Elijah stayed in there. I couldn't even handle it. I couldn't even handle it. I had to come out of that bathroom. So I'm telling you, people, sometimes we don't understand so the first kind of person is those who takes God's blessings completely for granted. The second type, those who are grateful for how God has blessed them. God has blessed them abundantly, they know it, and they're constantly thankful for all of the blessings that God has given them. And then there's a third type. And those are the rare few who are grateful to God just because he is God. No matter what happens, they're grateful to God just because he is God. And see, when you got that kind of, can you imagine just being with a person and they just glad to be with you when you ain't doing nothing for them? They just glad to be with you. Sometimes I look right up here and I see Clayton and Natasha. They're always sitting right there, and you can tell they just glad to be with each other. You know, you ain't got to necessarily do anything for them. They're just glad to be in the presence of each other. That third type is just glad that God is God. And regardless of what happened, because I recognize that throughout life, I may go through some rough stuff, but I'm just glad that God is God. And I am just thankful that God is God, because sometimes my limited intellect cannot even see all that God is. Just like when I was a child, I couldn't see all what my daddy was. And I couldn't see what my father was until I got some age, until I got some maturity. Matter of fact, my daddy used to he had all these little sayings. But one of his sayings was, he said, son, he said, a lot of people are like hogs. Now, he wasn't talking about physically. He was talking about mentally and spiritually. He said, a lot of people are like hogs. And he grew up on a farm. He grew up in the country. And he said, a hog will constantly snort on the ground, just eating slop. They would pour the slop in the slop bucket, and they would just eat the slop. Or they would be out in the yard just eating the acorns. And a hog will eat all day long and never look up to see where the food came from. They will never look up to see where the food came from. And when we look up and when we understand, it's not Thanksgiving Day. It's Thanksgiving life. And when you understand that, it's not the day, it's the life. And we need to be thankful to God for every single second and every single minute that he has granted us. And there are so many things that he has given us. It's just almost beyond our imagination. Will Bowen said this. He says, complaining and grumbling is like bad breath. You notice it when it comes out of somebody else's mouth, but not your own. Deep statement. And sometimes, it's just, I've just seen it in life. Some people are just geared to grumble. They just geared to grumble. There was a pastor, he had an old lady in his congregation, and she just complained about everything. And one year, the old lady had a really great crop of potatoes. All her potatoes were the best in the whole county. And the pastor saw her basket of potatoes, and he started smiling. He said, ain't nothing she going to be able to complain about now. These potatoes are perfect. She ain't got a single potato in that whole crop that's bad. All her potatoes are perfect. There's nothing she can complain about now. So the pastor came up to her and he said, "Hey, how you doing? I see your potatoes is great, great, great." And the old lady looked at him and said, "But where are the bad potatoes for the hogs?" You know, sometimes you just, some people are so geared to finding the negative that they cannot see the positive, and they will find that negative somewhere. And I have to deal with this myself, and I have to constantly remind myself, don't let the negative throw you off from God's blessings. In September of 2008, the Dow dropped 777 points. It was the largest stock market drop in a single day in the history of the stock market. Now, we've had during this recent crisis some drops that have matched and exceeded that, but at the time, that was the largest percentage drop in the history of the financial markets in the United States. I remember that day because on that day, the company that James and I own, we got our largest order in the history of the company on that day. It came from a company who is the largest chain of health food stores in the world. And I knew when I saw that the world was going one way and God was telling me, you're going another way. Well, in March, that same company that James and I own had a record month in the midst of the worst pandemic the U.S. has seen in modern times. When everything was shut down, we went the other way and went through the roof. And I knew God was telling me then, the world is going one way, you're going another way. Well, this last week, that same company in September of 2008 that gave us that largest order filed for bankruptcy. Now, the thing about it, they owed the company a little bit over $400,000. So I'm looking at this bankruptcy, and I'm saying to myself, oh, my goodness, this going to hurt. This is $400,000, over $400,000. We might not get our money. It's a good probability we might not get our money. This thing going to be bad. Woo, my goodness. And it was only until this morning I realized that's the same company that I sent you 12 years ago to show you one direction. They have been an excellent company for 12 years. They've had all these orders. They paid all this stuff, all them 12. You forgetting about all of that, and you focusing on this. I said, oh, my goodness. So I have to deal with that same thing. One little thing happened. And some of y'all say, there ain't even no little thing. But the point is, God's got it. So if he could show me the salvation with the other stuff, if he could show me salvation, what makes you think if he done brought you through all of this, what makes you think he's not going to bring you through that? So if he's brought you this, and we can forget so easily about all, we can become like little children. Yeah, I know what you did for me back in 2008. I know what you did for me 2 months ago, but what you going to do for me this month? That's the way we think, and we forget all of this stuff, and it allows our spirits to go down, and we're not realizing God has got this, people. Don't let individual circumstances take you down. You ought to be constantly saying, thank you, thank you, thank you. It's so much stuff. It's so much, I can't begin to name it. Thank you, Lord, of all of the things. And when we understand this, and when we get away from the plague of Thanksgiving Day and move to the blessing of a Thanksgiving life, it takes us into the promised land. Because, see, I understand the principle. Grumbling folk will never get to the promised land. The promised land is not a place. It's not a physical place. It was in the Bible, but the Bible always has multiple levels. The promised land is a place in the mind and heart. Because people, even heaven had folk. That's why a third of the angels had to be cast out of heaven. Heaven had folk that was up there grumbling and complaining about one thing or another. And God just had to boot them out. So it's not, if you don't have your mind and spirit right in a attitude of thanksgiving. God has done so much for all of us. And there is no perfection in the material plane. And I don't even think there's any perfection in the spiritual plane, because there's stuff up there. Or else they wouldn't have had a war in heaven. There is no perfection. You've got to understand some things, and you got to look, and you got to be thankful for what God has granted. And see, God has a plan. Now, his plan is perfect. But his perfect plan is not painless, because you cannot grow. He cannot separate the tares from the wheat without some pain and some threshing and some centrifuging. He can't separate without going through some thrashing. So his plan is perfect, but to us, because there's some pain involved in the plan, we think there's something wrong with the plan. God got this stuff. And we got to get to the habit and to the understanding of those two words. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. You know, even I travel a lot of places, and everywhere I travel, sometimes they ask you for a review. And sometimes, to be honest, but I've been some places that I wanted to give them a 1 star. I will not write negative reviews. First of all, they got enough folk who want to write negative reviews. Ain't no question about that. I will only write positive reviews, because I don't even want, even though it's absolutely true, I will not write negative reviews. There's plenty of folk on, because matter of fact, if you got 10 folk, 5 have a good experience, 5 had a bad experience. The bad experience people are generally 10 times more likely to write a review than the folk with a good experience. When something negative happens, you're going to hear from folks. Something positive. The world needs to hear the thank you from all of the good stuff. It's plenty of folk going to tell you the negative. They're going to talk about the negative all day long. You can turn on the news, the negative. See, you're going to see on the news the running total of how many folk have died from this virus all day long. They will not tell you how many folk healed, how many folk not having a problem, how many folk well, how many folk got married, how many folk happy. They ain't going to tell you all that. They're only going to tell you the negative 1 star stuff. They won't tell you the 5 star stuff. So you got to have that into your mind, into your spirit. And you got to have these 2 words on the tip of your tongue all the time. In your spirit all the time. And when you can say those words, it changes your blessings. It changes your blessings. Thank you. Thank you, dear Heavenly Father. I thank you for all that you have done, all that you shall do, Father. And Father, even the things that you do that I may not like, I thank you for that, because I know you are a loving Father. And everything you have done is for my good, one way or another, sooner or later, Father. It is for my good. I believe that. God, I thank you for being God. Father, I pray right now that from this day forward, that we'll be able to see through a different lens of life. And we'll be able to see the Thanksgiving life, not just the Thanksgiving day. And Father, we'll be able to praise you and to speak life and to speak joy and to speak peace and to speak thanksgiving in all that we see and do. For there is no perfection in the material plane, but there is perfection in your plan, dear Father. Father, forgive me for the grumbling that I have done. Forgive me for the complaining that I have done. And help me to see from this day forward the blessing and the glory in your will, in your way, and in your world. In thy Son Jesus' name I pray. Amen. I thank you for joining us today at Brothers of the Word. You can go to brothersoftheword.com, listen to this message, or send it to a friend absolutely free of charge. Thank you for joining us today at Brothers of the Word, because, brother, you need the Word. From Brothers of the Word.